When our main protagonist called Yuji Itadori calls to check up on his sick grandfather, the old man yells at him to stop checking on him and focus on his studies instead. At night, we see Fushiguro Megumi searching for a cursed object on the school premises. The next day, Yuji's occult club's shenanigans are interrupted by the student council president, who tells them their days are numbered. However, the club leader tries to sound relevant by revealing the school field has a long history of being haunted, but unfortunately the president already knew the previous incidents were caused by ticks. Everyone is surprised when he reveals that Yuji is not a registered member of the occult club. This makes the PE teacher confess to forcefully registering him for the track team. To solve the issue, he agrees to let Yuji leave if he can defeat him in a contest. While investigating, Fushiguro discovers that the school has a lot of cursed spirits. However, his attention is drawn to the students watching the contest. The teacher throws an incredible distance and is proud of himself. But when it is Yuji's turn, he throws the shot like a golf ball. Before club meetings end, Yuji visits his grandfather, who scolds him for ditching club meetings to visit him. He advises Yuji to help others so he won't end up alone like he is. Just then, Yuji notices his grandfather has died. When he finishes with the final paperwork, Fushiguro approaches him in respect to the cursed object he happened to goof around with in the occult club. He explains the significance and dangers it can cause, but Yuji finds it hard to believe. He then hands him the empty container, while revealing the other members' plan to open the actual object at school. In school, the occult members manage to break the seal of the cursed object. Just then, they are attacked by cursed spirits from above. As Yuji leads Fushiguro to school, they are faced with a barrier that doesn't permit Yuji to go further. Inside, the cursed spirits have already been unleashed and we see one trying to possess the male student. Fushiguro quickly rushes to their aid by summoning his Shikigami dog to attack the spirit he encounters. When he gets to the student's location, he is too late as the curses are about to devour them. However, Yuji suddenly arrives through the window. He punches the curse hard enough to save the two in time. When Yuji asks what the object does, Fushiguro explains it is Sukuna's fingers, an object which can be eaten to gain more cursed energy. A curse then appears to devour Yuji, along with the object, so Fushiguro protects him. The giant cursed spirit squishes him, making his demon dogs disappear before he is tossed outside. Having taken too much damage, Fushiguro is unable to fight anymore, so Yuji comes to his aid. He battles the cursed spirit despite being an ordinary human, but he is quickly overpowered as it is revealed only a curse can defeat a curse. Just before he is eaten, Yuji gulps the finger as a last resort. He immediately gains immense power which he uses to one-shot the curse, but then his body transforms to reveal he has been possessed by the owner of the finger. Immediately, Fushiguro labels him as a curse and moves to exorcise him. When Yuji reveals he has regained control of his body, Fushiguro becomes conflicted. A sorcerer called Gojo Satoru then appears and asks for an update on the situation, so Yuji reveals he ate the special grade curse object. When Gojo confirms this, he tells Yuji to let Sukuna take over his body for 10 seconds only. After he finishes warming up, he tosses the souvenir he bought to Fushiguro. As he is distracted, he is suddenly attacked by Sukuna, but he outsmarts him. As they fight, Gojo reveals he wants to show off to his student, so he goes on the offensive, while Sukuna is stuck at the receiving end of each attack. As Sukuna decides to get serious, the 10 seconds elapse, so Yuji regains control of his body. Gojo knocks him out and reveals to Fushiguro that he might be executed depending on his condition when he wakes up. Back at the school, Yuji is awake, so Gojo reveals he has postponed his execution, but in exchange, he has to keep devouring Sukuna's fingers. The next day, Yuji goes to cremate his grandfather along with Gojo. After he is done, he agrees to the proposal, so he devours the second finger. Although his body begins to transform, he doesn't allow Sukuna to take over. On seeing this, Gojo gets excited as his ability is promising. Afterward, Fushiguro arrives to inform him he is now a first-year student of Tokyo's Jujutsu Technical School for Sorcerers. When they arrive at the school, Sukuna finds a way to talk by morphing Yuji's body. When Yuji notices Gojo's reaction, he asks who Sukuna actually is. So Gojo explains that Sukuna is known as the King of Curses, who is so strong that after thousands of years, his body parts still can't be destroyed. The next day, the last admitted student arrives in Tokyo, so the boys wait at the airport to welcome her. Their opinion of her drops when they notice her making a scene by arguing with a model scout who refused to give her the time of day. Afterward, she introduces herself as Nobara Kujisaki, their new classmate. Gojo informs the group they are going into the city, so Yuji and Nobara are excited since they are from the countryside. However, they are disappointed when he brings them to a haunted house to exorcise cursed spirits. He then directs Nobara and Yuji to carry out the exorcism, so Yuji quickly explains that he can't use cursed energy yet. This makes Gojo hand him a special tool that he can use to defeat curses. Inside, Nobara is annoyed she has to exercise curses on her first day, so she suggests they both split up to cover more ground. When she leaves, a curse suddenly attacks Yuji, but his senses are too sharp to be caught unaware. When the curse attacks again, Yuji counters it fearlessly by incapacitating it before striking the finishing blow on the head. Meanwhile, Nobara notices a cursed spirit hiding in a mannequin, so she attacks it using her special technique. However, her attacks are not strong enough to defeat it. Some seconds after, the nail surges with enough energy to destroy the cursed spirit. She finds a child hiding behind some boxes, so she goes to lend a hand. But the child gets intimidated by her, so he refuses to go along. Just then, another cursed spirit captures and holds him hostage. This makes Nobara freeze as she can't attack in this situation. She gets annoyed and anxious because the weak cursed spirit has put her in a tight spot. She decides to surrender her arms in hopes that the curse spares the boy and takes her life instead. However, it doesn't. Just then, Yuji attacks the curse from behind the wall, and although he missed, he goes ahead to destroy the wall and save the child from the curse's grasp. When the curse moves to escape, Nobara quickly requests for its severed arm, which she uses as a channel to exorcise the real curse that has already broken out. Some days later, the first years are assigned to a cursed spirit case. At the scene, their guide explains the situation, thereby revealing that some survivors are still in the building. He also adds that their priority is to rescue survivors rather than to fight. When they enter a room, they find that the building's interior is completely different. Fushiguro explains that what they are witnessing is called a domain manifested out of cursed energy. As they move along, they find some corpses, one of which hasn't been shredded into pieces, so Yuji plans to take it along with him. However, Fushiguro stops him by stating they aren't risking their lives by dragging along a criminal's body while on an investigation. As they get into an argument, Nobara, who tries to calm them down, is suddenly swallowed up by the floor. Immediately, Fushiguro notices his dogs have been killed. He tells Yuji to run, but it's too late as the cursed spirit, who is a special grade, has already shown up in front of them. They both freeze up from his aura, but Yuji, who manages to draw his weapon, has his hands cut off. Out of fear, Yuji asks Sukuna to lend him his powers, but he refuses and even reveals he would kill Fushiguro and Nobara if given control. The cursed spirit then releases a freighting attack which scares the hell out of Fushiguro, so Yuji begs him to find Nobara and go out to safety. When he leaves, the cursed spirit begins hitting Yuji with powerful energy blasts in different successions. It sends a scorching energy attack that slowly destroys his body. As he holds out in pain, his life flashes before him, so he regrets eating the cursed finger. Elsewhere, Nobara is about to be eaten by a cursed spirit, but she is saved in time by one of Fushiguro's summoning. Back at the battle, Yuji knows he is faced with certain death, so he laments that he doesn't want to die a pathetic death. As a last resort, he lets out all of his emotions into his fist and finally creates a cursed energy. But this too is insufficient against the cursed spirit. When he gets the signal from Fushiguro, he quickly switches with Sukuna. His presence makes the cursed spirit quiver in fear, but Sukuna is more interested in how to make Yuji regret switching bodies with him. When he gets an idea, the cursed spirit interrupts him by attacking, so he deflects the attack, thus healing Yuji's hands in the process. Sukuna gets pissed and goes to finish it off. However, it has a lot of fighting spirit, so he decides to toy with it before sending it to its death. Below, the cursed spirit regenerates its severed part and prepares to attack again. Sukuna then decides to show him a fraction of his powers by summoning his own domain. In an instant, the cursed spirit is sliced into pieces, thereby allowing Sukuna to retrieve another finger. When it's time to switch back, Yuji doesn't take over, so Sukuna gets excited. He immediately goes to meet Fushiguro outside to inform him he has taken control of Yuji's body. He rips out Yuji's heart and then swallows the third finger for good measure. This means that once Yuji switches back, he dies immediately. Given the situation, Fushiguro's only choice is to fight, so he summons his Shikigamis and attacks Sukuna along with them. Sukuna, however, seems to be enjoying himself with the little brawl. When Fushiguro's summonings get an opportunity to attack, their attacks do not cause any damage, so Sukuna simply destroys them. Thereafter, he gets serious and begins tossing Fushiguro all over the city. During the beatdown, his bird Shikigami comes to his aid, but it is quickly smashed down along with Fushiguro. In his last moments, he recalls the memory of his kind sister who died. He suddenly gets a surge of energy, so Sukuna is glad the fight isn't over. But before they continue, he suddenly stops and begins speaking to Yuji indirectly. His pep talk is so good that Yuji regains control of his body. However, he begins losing blood and collapses to his death. Some days later, we see a group of villains discussing how the previous incident was a test to find out how strong the current Sukuna is. Later, Goju is briefed about the circumstances leading to Yuji's death. Their discussion is interrupted by Miss Yari, a doctor, who reveals she plans to dissect his body. As Fushiguro and Nobara mourn their dead friend, they are approached by a second-year student named Maki. She is accompanied by a panda and another classmate called Inumaki. They invite the first years to participate in an inter-school exchange activity coming up. They accept the second year's invite in exchange that they train them to get stronger. At a restaurant, we see that the villain group is made up of some curses and a jujutsu sorcery. He reveals that for them to get the upper hand, they have to deal with Goju Satoru and also find a way to get Yuji on their side, as he is Sukuna's vessel. Inside Yuji's corpse, we find that he is alive but trapped along with Sukuna in his innate domain. Yuji tries resorting to violence, but Sukuna is leagues above him in that aspect. He reveals that Yuji is still alive and he can come back to life if he agrees to his conditions. Back at the present, Yuji suddenly wakes up just before the doctor continues her examination. Later, Goju begs the doctor to keep Yuji's situation a secret for the time being. At the restaurant, the curses are told their only way to handle Goju is to seal him using a special artifact. When the manager notices their table hasn't ordered anything, he asks a waiter to go check on them, but he quits because his survival instinct tells him to avoid the table. The manager then goes to talk to them, but he is engulfed in flames as a result of Jugo's ability. He also sets everyone else on fire and reveals he would take care of Satoru himself. Later, Goju instructs Yuji on how cursed energy works. Yuji gets disappointed when he finds that he doesn't have the ability to use fancy jujutsu skills. For his training, he is to learn how to control his cursed energy by watching movies while trying hard not to wake up the principal's doll, which attacks him occasionally. On his way home, Goju senses a cursed spirit, so he tells Agachi to go on without him. Shortly after, Jugo attacks furiously from the sky. He throws an object towards Goju, which suddenly blasts fire hot enough to melt the road. However, Jugo is surprised to find Goju totally unharmed. Next, he summons some insects which he sends toward Goju. Although he stops their attacks, they quickly turn out to be remote bombs that detonate after a while. Jugo continues to unleash various forms of attacks while Goju does nothing in response. When he manages a direct hit, he talks down on Goju, thinking he has been defeated. Again, Goju comes out unscathed. He then reveals to him his technique called Infinity, which creates a space between him and his enemies. Goju finally goes on the offensive and begins a fast attack that Jugo can't keep up with. He goes on to unleash a curse technique that sends Jugo flying into the forest. Goju catches up with him and continues to bully him while he tries to make a run for it. Shortly after, Goju appears with Yuji, who he reveals has to learn from the battle. When Jugo asks why he brought a kid to slow him down, Goju responds by saying there's no problem since he is weak. This pisses Jugo off intensely that he makes an outburst and summons his domain. His domain expansion transforms everything into a cave of magma. Here, Goju begins tutoring Yuji on the various advantages of a domain as well as how to counter them. To round off, Goju explains the most effective way to deal with a domain is to cancel it with a stronger domain. Just then, Jugo's attack is stopped and Goju unleashes his domain, which sends them into an infinite void. Here, Jugo is unable to move an inch, so Goju easily rips off his head. After the battle, Goju tries to interrogate him, but he doesn't cooperate. Another cursed spirit stops the interrogation by utilizing flowers to create a distraction, which allows Jugo to be rescued. Some days later, the first years are approached by two students called Maya and Tadu from another school. Tadu reveals he wants to test their mantle, but first he asks Fushiguro what his type of woman is. When Fushiguro responds by saying he doesn't have a type, Tadu sheds a tear and calls him boring. He immediately attacks Fushiguro with so much speed he is unable to react. So, Fushiguro summons some frogs to help with his mobility, but when Tadu attacks, he is blitzed like an amateur. Tadu doesn't show any restraints as he crushes his body into the buildings. As the fight gets intense, the second years arrive just in time to restrain Tadu, so the battle ends. The next day, we see a boy purchasing a ticket to see a movie. During the movie, some delinquents discuss loudly, so the boy and the rest of the audience can't concentrate on the movie. While they distract everyone, Mahito, the leader of the cursed spirits, turns them all into curses. On seeing this, the boy called Junpei rushes out to inquire why Mahito did such a horrible thing. When he is asked if he has a relationship with delinquents, he recalls being bullied by them in school. Later, Yuji and a senior sorcery called Nanami arrive to investigate the scene. Here, he shows Yuji how to track cursed energy, so they tail the culprits together. Outside, they find some cursed spirits lurking, so Nanami instructs Yuji to focus on the smaller one while he handles the others. During the battle, Nanami explains that his curse technique works by forcefully creating weak points on his enemies. He then demonstrates by splitting the cursed spirit in an instant using a blunt blade. Just then, Yuji is attacked by the other cursed spirit, so he uses his newly acquired skill to one-shot his way to victory. After the battle, Nanami notices that what they have been fighting are humans who have been morphed into curses. Elsewhere, we see Junpei has taken a liking to Mahito, who has begun teaching him about cursed spirits. Later, Yuji and Nagachi begin tailing Junpei, who is the only lead in the case. They plan to use a low-level curse to determine if he is a normal human being or a threat. At the sewer, Nanami has successfully tracked down Mahito, who underestimates him since he isn't Gaju Satoru. When they begin fighting, he closely observes Mahito's moves while attacking simultaneously. He manages to deal a blow on Mahito, who is unaware of his curse technique. However, he heals himself and explains that the body forms around the soul, and his technique is based on this concept. In town, Junpei meets up with a teacher who informs him his friends are dead. He then freaks out at the teacher's ignorance because he failed to notice he was being bullied by the boys. He tries to use a curse technique as Mahito instructed him, but Yuji interrupts the moment while trying to restrain the cursed spirit. He goes to inform Junpei he has a question for him, but the teacher scolds him for interrupting their conversation. However, Yuji doesn't care about the teacher, so he embarrasses him by running away with the pants. Back at the battle, Mahito can manipulate his body and that of other humans to attack Nanami. He suddenly lands a fast attack by turning his legs into hooves. He reveals he wants to alter Nanami's soul too, so this makes Nanami fight back while looking for an opening to escape the bad matchup. Observing the battle has dragged on, Mahito thinks Nanami must have grown tired, but instead, Nanami switches up and decides to get serious. His released cursed energy immensely boosts his speed and power, which he uses to destroy the wall. As the rubble distracts Mahito, it creates an opening for Nanami to cut off his legs, after which he quickly withdraws. Elsewhere, Yuji questions Junpei about the incident at the theater, but he lies that he didn't notice anything else. Moving on, Yuji talks with him while they wait for Agachi. As they discuss, it turns out they are both fans of horror movies. Later, Junpei's mom shows up and asks who Yuji is. After introductions, she invites him over to have dinner with them. In their home, the two boys along with Junpei's mom have fun discussing over dinner. When she wakes up at night, she finds Sukuna's finger at her table. The finger also attracts a cursed spirit that kills her. Although this is all part of Mahito's plan, he goes to comfort and uses the opportunity to push Junpei towards despair. The next day in Junpei's school, the students notice something in the sky. This turns out to be Mahito learning how to conjure a veil. When he succeeds, the majority of the humans inside the school collapse, leaving some designated persons standing. Junpei confronts a student who he thinks placed the cursed finger in his house, but the student is unaware of whatever he is being accused of. Junpei then begins cursing and torturing him in hopes that he'll admit his crimes. Before he finishes him off, Yuji arrives at the scene to stop the madness. The two with conflicting ideas begin battling each other. Junpei can use a jellyfish shikigami, which makes it impossible to hit him. He uses this curse technique to hold Yuji in place, but he easily breaks out and continues his sad attacks on the jellyfish. Finally, he lands a blow that sends Junpei flying through the window. As the fight drags on, Yuji tries to get through to him with words, so he soon realizes how broken Junpei is. When he attacks again, Yuji doesn't try to dodge. On seeing that his attack has harmed Yuji, Junpei finally calms down and allows Yuji to get through to him while bleeding. According to the plan, Mahito arrives at the scene and attacks Yuji first. Yuji begs Junpei to run, but he is confused. He soon understands when Mahito reveals his malevolent intent. He immediately transforms Junpei into a curse and sends him after Yuji. As Yuji is attacked, he begs Sukuna to turn Junpei back into human in exchange for whatever he wants. However, Sukuna refuses as he wants to watch Yuji despair. As the two curses begin mocking him, Junpei dies shortly after. This brings Yuji clarity, so he throws a punch at Mahito. Although he isn't supposed to take damage, he suddenly feels the impact, which means that his soul as well as his body was attacked. The battle gets intense as Mahito hopes to push Yuji to the limit where he would have to rely on Sukuna. However, he soon finds out that Yuji is very resilient. He succeeds in stabbing Yuji, so he moves to tamper with his soul directly. However, his technique links him to Sukuna's soul instead. Inside, Sukuna gets irritated by his presence and kicks him out immediately. This creates an opening for Yuji to land several attacks on him. Surprisingly, Mahito appears unharmed behind Yuji, but before he can land a surprise attack, Nanami shows up in time. Nanami notices Yuji made Mahito bleed, so he devises a plan that involves Yuji landing the blows while he becomes the bait. The battle commences again with Mahito on the offensive. When he observes Yuji poses a problem, he sends some transformed humans after him. Yuji then tries to avoid them so he won't have to become a killer, but after a while, he is left with no choice. With Yuji busy, Mahito is about to finish off Nanami, but he suddenly shows up to help Nanami. This time, the two manage to read Mahito's moves, so they change the tide of the battle in their favor. In the heat of the battle, Mahito activates his domain expansion. However, he locks Yuji out of the domain since he can counter his soul tampering technique. Nanami, on the other hand, doesn't have a domain expansion at his disposal, so he gives up on the battle. But then, Yuji somehow invades the domain from the outside. His presence makes Mahito come in contact with Sukuna's soul again, and this time, he doesn't let it slide. He tortures Mahito, causing him to take so much damage that his domain expansion gets undone. Noticing he has the advantage, Yuji moves to attack Mahito, who has increased in size for some reason. When he lands his attack, it turns out the size increase was a distraction to allow him to escape successfully. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to drp a like and subscribe for MRE anime recaps, and until next time guys, take care.